Hello everyone, my name is Marion, and I have OCD, and I've suffered it for pretty much my entire life. When it comes to OCD, it feels as though it doesn't nearly have as much as a reputation compared to something like depression and anxiety, two things that I also suffer from, but it feels as though it's not taken nearly as seriously compared to those two, when it's kind of seen as kind of this quirky little thing. It's not as much anymore, but for a long time it was seen as this quirky little thing of like, I like to have things exactly perfect and things like that. But when in actuality, it's a lot more than that. It's literally called Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. You have obsessions and compulsions that come with this disorder. OCD is not just a funny little quirk. It can be debilitating. It could be harrowing. It could be all sorts of different things that causes you not to want to get up in the morning or ever get up again. And so I say this as someone who suffers from it immensely. It is not fun to deal with. And yes, I wish that I didn't deal with it, but I don't have a choice pretty much at all. Also, this video is not going to be a in-depth analysis on OCD, why it exists, what type of evolutionary trait needed to be in order for OCD to exist, and things like that. That is not at all what this video is about. This video is really me telling you my journey that I've went through when it comes to this disorder, and just overall my experience of just living with this disorder from day to day, from ever since I was a kid all the way up until to the current day. And so yeah, that's pretty much what this video is going to be. Now, I first showed signs of OCD, at least from my parents, what my parents told me, around the time of, well, I don't know the exact age, but my father told me that he remembered specifically that one time I asked him if he wanted to have a drink of my drink, and he went to go take a sip from the straw, but I told him no, to take the lid off and then drink it. Now, obviously that seems like a very small thing, but it was something that my dad kind of went, and obviously looking back, knowing that I have OCD and have had the diagnosis, obviously. Just, by the way, another case in point, I've also been diagnosed with OCD. This isn't something that I just self-diagnosed. This is something that I definitely have, all right? But looking at it in the grand scheme of things, this was a telltale sign that there obviously was something more underlying here. And then as far as things that I can remember, I very specifically remember always being obsessed with the smell of my hands. It was something that I would if I had a meal and it left a smell on my hands, I would go to wash my hands until the smell went away before I played with my toys, because I didn't want my toys to have, that type of smell on them. It was something that I was very particular about. And then around the time when I was in grade school, of probably around third, fourth, fifth grade, honestly. Fifth grade is around the time that it got really bad. I started obsessing over germs and washing my hands, which I know is a very stereotypical OCD thing, but at the same time, it is part of it. It's not the entire, basis for the disorder, because that's the thing about OCD, is that OCD comes in different subtypes. There are people with OCD who don't probably excessively wash their hands, but have some other type of version of OCD that comes with intrusive thoughts or comes with their own compulsions that they feel they need to do, So it's not always just hand washing, but in this case in point, it was hand washing. And I think it started because in first grade, here's the thing, OCD always tends to have a trigger. And I think that it started from first grade when we watched this germ video. It was supposed to teach us about make sure to wash your hands, and germs are all these things, but it ended up terrifying young me. And so that ended up subconsciously sticking with me. And from that point on, I would wash my hands a lot more than usual. But then it was around fifth grade when I started washing them excessively. It got to the point of where when I would come home from school, I would wash my hands, and then I realized, wait, I put my arms on the desk, so I gotta wash my arms, and then I'm like, wait, I've touched my face, or I touched the back of my neck. Basically, any part of my skin that I felt that was exposed, I would feel the need to wash it, because to me, it was like, oh, well, this has been contaminated, And there were times that I remember in fifth grade, even having those feelings of I remember specifically when walking to lunch or something like that, and just thinking, I'm not gonna make it. I'm not gonna be able to wash myself when I get home. I'm not gonna, I would start panicking about it, And that was something that persisted for quite a while, until eventually I kind of got over it, and I didn't really understand how I did until I realized that I had went through my own version of exposure therapy. Now, if you don't know what exposure therapy is, it's essentially making you face what your OCD fears. Because that's the thing, is OCD, a lot of it for me is based off of the things that I fear, whether it be harming myself, harming others, which we will get into in a bit because that's when shit starts to get real. But my biggest fears with OCD from when I was a kid, because I've always been a hypochondriac ever since I was a kid, I would always fear that I had cancer or some other type of disease. And honestly, I still do the same thing to this very day. But here, I realized that the thing that I did was, I remember very specifically one day grabbing a doorknob and not washing my hands after touching it. And then I would just keep doing that. And slowly over time, the fear started to subside and it wasn't nearly as bad as it once was. But at the same time, it still lingered, which is another thing about OCD, is that it sucks because depending on this different subtype, which you also could have many different subtypes, because there's a whole period of just different types of OCDs and things like that. But it is something that I still live with to this day. I still wash my hands quite a lot depending on certain things that I touch, but it is nowhere near as bad as it once was, where I was having to wash pretty much my entire body. In fact, I actually forgot to mention that at some point around 5th grade, I graduated from washing parts of my body on the sink to just full on taking a shower when I got home from school. And something else I would do is I would sit in a very specific spot in my home, and I would do my homework there, sitting in this little corner, not touching my toys, not touching anything else until I finished my homework. And that is something that would persist from all the way from elementary to high school. That was something I did all the way up until high school, all the way till the end. So needless to say, I still live with that version of contamination OCD. But it's nowhere near as bad as it once was. It is something that I do feel is now manageable in my current day-to-day life. But continuing on from that, my OCD would kind of go into a weird dormitory. It wasn't gone, obviously, because it's never going to go away, but it was in this place where I didn't really think about it anymore. And I think another thing that sucked about OCD is the fact that I felt as if I couldn't get help for it. It felt as if, so the thing is that I always thought my OCD was my fault. I always felt it was because my parents would, if in a way, I felt like they were shaming me for having OCD. I would do something when it came to my OCD, and they would be like, my mom would be like, OCD and all this stuff like that, and my dad would point it out, and I always felt like as if there was something wrong with me, or I was doing something bad, that there was something that I did it to myself, when in actuality it's like, no, I was born with this is just how I am, and that's something that I kind of still have to accept even today, unfortunately, which kind of sucks. But yeah, that was a whole other thing as well. I'm also still obsessed with the way things smell, as far as my action figures or my personal items. If they smell like food or something that I don't want them to smell like, or if they smell dirty, that is something that I obsess over and get, I immediately need to do something about it. But to continue on with what I was saying, that lasted all the way up until high school. And needless to say, it was so bad to where if I didn't finish, I would not leave that spot until I finished my homework. So I would be there for possibly hours trying to finish my homework, because sometimes, homework takes a long time. And I would sit there for hours in that spot and I would not move. I wouldn't touch any of the stuff, or any of my stuff that I had at my home, but besides being in that corner basically. And it would hurt my back because I would just be sitting on the floor. But I had to do that because that's how I felt. I felt as if I would contaminate everything in my home if I didn't do that, And so that lasted all the way up until high school. I would also have different things within my home where I would have this weird, it almost felt like a tier list of the different types of contamination within my home. There was the toys in my living room that was this was base level. This was the base level for my OCD, where I need to make sure that I'm super sterile when I touch this stuff. Then there was the stuff in my room where I didn't need to be as sterile, but I still wanted to be sterile when touching the stuff in my room. Then there was school, where I did not care about the sterileness of where I was at, because everything was completely contaminated since everybody's been touching everything, Then there was the final tier, which is amusement parks. Amusement parks, I felt as if this was the Armageddon or the apocalypse of contamination. This was the place where it was if I come home from a theme park, it's okay, gonna literally completely wash my entire body, wash the clothes I was wearing, disinfect my phone, disinfect any personal items that I took to that place. That's how bad it was. If I got a souvenir, disinfect it. If it was a plushie, wash it. And it's something that I still do to this very day. And in all honesty, it's kind of a good habit because theme parks are pretty fucking gross, so you know. But overall, a lot of this is very contamination based. It obviously comes with compulsions, to which I still suffer from, but it overall was manageable and had gotten better as the years went on. But then my OCD graduated. You see, then I developed pure OCD, which is basically when you start getting intrusive thoughts and you can't stop thinking and obsessing over certain things, you know, even if you don't want to. I remember specifically in high school in 11th grade, for some reason, constantly having intrusive thoughts of harming myself. Like, you know, literally I would have this intrusive thought of grabbing a knife from my kitchen and completely just slitting my wrist. Despite the fact that I was not suicidal at the time, it was something that would literally play in my head so much and I didn't know why I was thinking about it. It was something that was constantly on my mind and I didn't know why. And it was something to the point of where it was like, it was hard. I would be in class and I would be having these thoughts and I couldn't focus because I didn't know why I was thinking these things. I was like, I don't want to hurt myself. I don't know what's happening, you know? And then I was thinking, but what if I do want to hurt myself? What if this is just how I truly feel and I want to harm myself? And it just got worse and worse. And eventually it ended up going away because I ended up starting to obsess over other things, because then I felt, I think it was like I felt my head or something. I actually, before that, the harm OCD, I actually had a version of health OCD, something that I still deal with, where I thought that I was like having a heart attack. I thought that there was something wrong with my heart, that my heart would race, or it would I felt a tightness within my chest, and it was something that it was constantly on my mind. No matter how much I tried to make it go away, I would feel tightness within my arms. I would have a shortness of breath, and which are all like signs of a heart attack. And I truly thought there was something wrong with me, to the point of where my father ended up having to take me to the emergency room. They did all these tests, and I remember this very specifically. The doctor comes in and he goes like, okay, so what's going on? Like, we checked everything and you're completely fine. What's going on here? They ended up giving me an anxiety pill and we're like, okay, yeah, you need to calm down. You need to get therapy. You need to talk to somebody. And so that was kind of funny. But that didn't end up lasting, because then the harm OCD came around. But then, yeah, I felt my head, I think, and I felt that one side of my head felt bigger than the other. Now, I didn't felt that way before about this side of my head. Nowadays, but I started thinking, what if I have a brain tumor? What if I'm dying from brain cancer? And I started thinking this, and this is the next thing that I would obsess over. I was obsessing over this idea that I had a brain tumor, and then I would feel these constant head tensions and migraines and all this shit that just made me feel so much worse. And it would just get worse and worse. I wasn't able to focus on anything. And I was experiencing a lot of the symptoms that seemingly people who have brain tumors were experiencing, when in actuality, it was a mix of my anxiety and my OCD. But also one other thing that I look back on and realize. So I probably got this part of my head that's different to this part. Is probably because that not too long before that, I had bumped my head on a desk. But the bump didn't seem that bad compared to other times when I bumped my head on something. But I can look back now and realize, because I've had a second one, unfortunately, that I actually had a concussion and I wasn't treating it correctly. And so the reason why I was also feeling that way is because I had a concussion and I wasn't doing anything about it. Because when you have a concussion, you want to rest. Stay away from technology, stay away from bright lights, you know. You have to take a time to rest, but I wasn't doing that. And so I was basically for months in this place where my head was hurting. I couldn't focus on anything because I had a concussion and I wasn't doing something about it. But also I thought that I had a brain tumor, so that was also making things worse. Because that's the thing, is that it's like what they say is that your mind is a very powerful thing. And obviously as you can see, it very much is, because my mind would make me believe that I was having heart issues. It was making me believe I had a brain tumor, despite the fact that I had neither, at least from what I know of. And so I was experiencing all these symptoms that were arising because of my anxiety and OCD, creating those symptoms for me, and then inadvertently making me believe that there was something wrong with me, you know? And so that would cause a whole thing. And then When that finally subsided, I don't know when exactly it did, or if I even stopped panicking about it, but then, you remember that harm OCD? Remember when that was a thing? Well, it's about to get a lot worse, because then, the next subtype of OCD that I ended up getting was thoughts about harming others. And that's when shit got fucking real. I'm not gonna go too much into the specifics of it because it's still something I don't like to think about, and it's just a whole thing. But once we got to that place, that's when it really got debilitating. That's when it got really hard to live, you know? And what's funny is that the self-harm OCD was actually the thing that set me off on like finally talking about like, hey, I'm not doing well. And that's when I finally got to a point of where we started to get in talks with talking to a therapist about the things I was going through, the depression, the anxiety. But I didn't ever address the OCD because to me it was like, well, or like we were starting to set things up. And so when this version of OCD, this subtype started, I was still in the process of getting a therapist and talking to somebody. And that was a whole thing. And so I remember specifically, it would be every night I would be trying to sleep and I would be crying myself to sleep because I didn't know why this was happening. And it was this constant question of, do I like these thoughts? Maybe are you a bad person? Are you going to do these things? What if you do these things? And it would just get worse and worse and worse and worse. And it was to a point, and it's something like, it was to the point of where it felt like eventually I ended up having to go on medication because I would not be able to live without having to have something to help me with this. But I remember specifically this because this was something that I would eventually deal with again, that it felt like I was living my life like constantly waiting, where I was constantly waiting for the next therapy appointment. I was constantly counting down the hours to take my medication, hoping that things would finally get better. And it was just this constant cycle. And eventually things got better as time went on, but it was something that it is something that I still have a lot of trauma from, you know. And then I experienced another version of OCD called existential OCD, where I was constantly questioning the fact of like, we do not know what happens after we die. We do not know if there's a God. And so then it was this constant thing of where I was constantly thinking about this, constantly thinking about what's my point in the grand scheme of the universe. I would literally start freaking out over the fact that the universe is a finite thing, like that, like in 10 billion something odd years, I don't actually remember the amount of years, to like 10 to the power of 10 or something like that is when the universe is going to end. It's going to be the heat death of the universe. And I was worrying about that excessively. I was worrying about what's going to happen after I die, like, and all this stuff. And it's like, obviously death is an inevitable thing. It is something that honestly to this day, like I still think about it and I still wonder about it. But the thing is that that's the thing, this kind of loops around back to the OCD, because something that you can notice with the patterns of every single subtype of OCD that I've talked about is the fact that it all comes with this sense of uncertainty. OCD is the look for certainty. You want there to be the certainty that you're not a bad person. You want there to be the certainty that you don't have like suicidal ideation or suicidal thoughts. It's the certainty that you're not going to get yourself sick or not get your family members sick from being contaminated with some type of disease, you know? It's the certainty of knowing what happens after we die, which is something that is literally an uncertainty that we have to accept, that we do not know. You know, that is what OCD really, at least personally for me, is the biggest thing, is this feeling of uncertainty. And that's and that's kind of the thing that you have to use to defeat OCD, because now I had a therapist for quite a while, but it wasn't an OCD therapist, but they still helped quite a bit about about the things that I was going through. Only just earlier this year, I started dealing with that same OCD that I dealt with all those years ago, and it was as if it came back 10 times stronger. And it was funny because I remember telling myself the first time around that this would be so much easier if this was the second time I was dealing with this, because then I would know that this isn't real. But unfortunately, it doesn't get easier the second time around, because then your mind creates all these other brand new things. Because that's the thing, is the OCD loves to create brand new things that you need to worry about, and it just makes it so much worse. And it works so fast. It will literally it will cause you to spiral, because that's another thing, is that you tend to ruminate. You want to keep questioning these thoughts, despite the fact they're intrusive thoughts. These are thoughts that you don't want to have, and you don't know why they're happening, but they're not, like, these aren't yours, because a therapist, like, But to kind of come back to what I was saying, you know, like I was dealing with these intrusive thoughts again, and it got to the point of where I genuinely did not want to live on this planet anymore. It got to a point of where I was just in constant state of agony, once again crying, not being able to eat. It got to the point of where I ended up having to check myself into a psych ward. And I am so glad that I did, because not only was I able, because the thing is, the reason why I wanted to was because I was doing the same thing again. I was counting down the hours, counting down the days to talk to somebody about what I was dealing with, you know? And once it got to that point, I realized I need to be in a place where if I am starting to feel this certain way, there are people, there are sources around me, like at what's it called? At hand's reach, there we go, to talk to. And that's what I ended up doing. So I ended up spending like around about a week in a psychiatric care. And needless to say, so it's funny, a lot of people have like psych ward horror stories and things like that. And I will say a lot of people who were in there were not having a good time because they were involuntarily put in there. But unfortunately for me, I was having, or I guess fortunately for me, I was having a pretty good time. I was actually extremely happy in there. I was like, wow, this is great. Like, I literally would tell some of the people I would talk to there, like, I was like, I think I'm the only person who's having a good time. And they would be like, yeah, you are. Because I would literally just spend the whole time drawing. Like, I would just draw with markers all day. And, like, I was able to talk to people if I was dealing with stuff. They were able to give me the right medication. But all of this, and like, we'll get back to that in a bit, but the thing is that while I was there, specifically a doctor, like a counselor or a therapist would talk to me. And she gave me a really good analogy of what it feels like when it comes to OCD, is that she told me that I keep trying to claim these thoughts and I keep trying to question these thoughts when it only makes it worse, you know? Because, and she equated OCD and the intrusive thoughts to the same thing as like when you get the intrusive thought of you falling down the stairs when you're about to go down stairs. It makes you want to grab onto that handrail more. That's exactly what it's like with these intrusive thoughts. They're, if anything, warnings that like, of things that you don't want to do, and so it's making you think about those things so you don't do them. It's the same thing with the handrail situation. It makes you want to grab onto that handrail on the stairs more, because now you're thinking about, what if I fall down? What if I break my neck because I fall down these stairs, you know? And that's really what it's like, and you have to unfortunately live with the uncertainty of it, and let these thoughts pass instead of constantly questioning them and ruminating on them, because then it only makes it worse. But that was something that was really enlightening to me. And needless to say, I would spend my time at the psych ward, you know, getting help and talking. And overall, I was very happy with the fact that I was able to get the right medication that I needed. It turns out I was on the wrong medication because they needed to put me on actual like OCD medication. But I had a really good time there. And like, here's just one of the pictures that I drew while I was over there, actually. So I think it looks pretty cool. And this is all done in marker. There's no pencils. We didn't have pencils with erasers, so all this was done completely in like one shot. So I'm actually really proud of that. If the angle looks a little different, the camera died. I had to charge it for a second. But now we're back. So anyways, continuing what I was saying. Shortly after I got out of the psych ward, I ended up getting in contact with an OCD therapist, finally, through the website NoCD. This video is not sponsored because, well, first of all, why would they sponsor a guy who only has 400 subscribers and 2 people watching this video? That's stupid. I'm not Howie Mandel. I wish I was, because then I'd be successful, but I'm not Howie Mandel. I am myself, and I can't change that, unfortunately. But anyways, that's besides the point. I've been working with NoCD. I've been working with one of their therapists, talking to them, and going through exposure therapy, and needless to say, it has been an astronomical help. I went from not being able to eat, not being able to sleep, just being overall completely debilitated from everything in life, to being able to go and actually go outside and be with friends without being in this constant state of panic, being able to just finally like be able to go to sleep without an excessive amounts of worry or having to, or constantly crying, being able to eat, basically be able to live life normally again, where I'm only slightly, you know, living life to the best that I possibly can. You know, when it comes down to it, I'm going to live with OCD for the rest of my life. It is something that is going to be a part of me forever, pretty much, you know, until I eventually die and either end up separating from my body and going to a cool place like the near-death experiencers say, where none of that's going to bother me because it's all within my brain, or I'm just going to cease to exist. Can you tell I've had existential OCD before? But anyways, that's besides the point. When it comes down to it, or I guess it is part of the point, because I'm saying that this, not, you know what I'm saying. I'm going to live with OCD for the rest of my life, but I'm trying to work to not let it define me and let it control my life, because during those times, it felt like as if it controlled every little thing in my life. Every little thing that I would do felt like as if it was in response to the OCD. And that is something that, honestly, I don't want to have to live through again. I know eventually I'm going to end up living through it, but I now have tools and resources and things that I can do in order to help myself navigate through the trenches that is my mind, and that is this disorder that ails me pretty much, it's going to ail me throughout my entire life, and that is the best that I can do. And this video, if anything, is a video to say that if there are people out there like me who suffer from OCD and you are able to get help, then please do so. Go to OCD. I'm pretty sure, like, and I hope that they will accept your insurance, because honestly, the way that their website is set up, the way that they are able to connect you with a therapist, and these therapists are trained specifically for OCD and all the different subtypes, you will get the help that you need, and it will honestly be to your benefit. And I can say without a doubt that I really do appreciate OCD for being able to, like, I appreciate OCD because they were able to connect me with the therapist that to this day I still talk to regularly and worked with, and she's absolutely amazing. So yeah, all in all, I'm going to live with OCD for my entire life, but I'm not going to let it define me, and I'm not going to let it control me, or at least I'm going to try my best to, which is the best that really anybody can say about anything, which is trying your best. Thank you to everyone for watching this video. I hope you all enjoyed it. If anybody even watched this video, I don't even know if anyone is watching this, in all honesty. I haven't posted in 5,000 years, and my view counts is literally at 0. And this video has very minimal editing and probably won't even really have that much of a thumbnail, because I want to, something that I've realized is that I've told myself since like the beginning of my first real video, if you will, that I wanted to make whatever I wanted to make, but I wasn't really living up to that, in all honesty, because I was still playing to the YouTube algorithm. I was still thinking, oh, I need to come up with ideas. I need to do this. I need to do that. When in actuality, what I really want to do is do the old style of YouTube, of just setting up a camera, talking to it, minimal editing, and just talking about whatever you want, whether it be talking about OCD or just talking about literally anything. And it's another thing where I'm also like, you know what, even if I've talked about a subject, like I've talked about Ronald McDonald before, you know, on this channel, and I'm going to talk about him again, because it feels like for a long time, like with content, you know, so many content creators feel like, oh, I've already talked about this, so I can't talk about it again. Who fucking cares? I want to talk about it. I want to talk about this again, okay? And if you want to watch, that's cool. If you don't, that's cool. But yeah, I'm slowly trying to pretty much kind of learn to enjoy this process again, and also just kind of be able to just like, I don't know, it's a whole thing. I don't really know too much right now, but I'm hoping that I'm hoping that I have a good time with this, because at the end of the day, even if this doesn't get many views, at least I'm like, you know what, I had a good time making it, and I will enjoy making stuff like this as time goes on. So yeah, like I really want to get into the style of like the Vlog Brothers and like Hank Green and all of them, who still just sit in front of a camera and be like, hey, this is what I want to talk about. And that's pretty much what I want to do. So yeah, that's what I want to do. Anyways, I guess that's pretty much it. Thank you to everyone for watching this video. I hope you all enjoyed it, and maybe I'll see you guys again sometime soon. And remember, stay safe and sane. Bye.